Fabulous. Okay, I'm hoping that you've pressed what you need to press now. So welcome everyone. Very excited to be here on Black History Month. Really excited to speak for you at the University of Hertfordshire Business School and beyond. I'm a Hertfordshire girl myself, been living in Hertfordshire now for 20 years. Didn't start life here, but absolutely love being in Hertfordshire. So really happy to be speaking to some people who some of you will be local. I know some of you won't be, some of you will be far and wide. But today my talk is about challenging, actually. It's about choosing to challenge, what challenge looks like, and also some of the challenges that I have overcome, all in a really positive light. But I think we have to acknowledge the reality that challenge absolutely still exists. My parents and my grandparents experienced challenges very different to my own. Does anyone recognize these flags? Maybe type in the chat where my heritage is from, and these beautiful pictures of where my family are. Yeah, my grandmother and my grandfather came over. I'm just going to see, yes, Jamaica and St. Lucia. Yeah, absolutely, Brendan. So my grandparents on my dad's side are from Jamaica, on my mum's side from St. Lucia, both beautiful Caribbean islands, one much larger than the other, came to England to create a better life for themselves and, of course, for their offspring. And my mum came to England when she was about 13, my dad when he was about 16. So they were teenagers who came to the UK because their parents had come to the UK to create a better life. And we all stayed. We've all been here and built our lives. But I never forget how hard they had to work, the kind of roles that they had to do in order to keep us afloat, the challenges that they experienced. And, they say we stand on the shoulders of giants. I absolutely did. Am I brave enough to emigrate to another country and start a new life? Well, I haven't done it so far. With probably not very much, then a hope and a prayer is what they came with, and amazing what they were able to create. So I'm very, very proud of my heritage, very proud to be a Black woman, and very proud to be here to be speaking to you. So a little bit about me and my journey. So started off with very humble beginnings in a council estate in northwest London. My mum had me when she was only a teenager herself, and worked really hard to create a life for us. What were people's ambitions for me? I think not huge ambitions in terms of school. I guess, get a good job and work hard. Don't get pregnant as a teenager, probably were the sort of ambitions that were there for me. And it's not to say that people didn't expect me to do well in life, but just that from the background I had, those were the sorts of ambitions that were good enough, really. Those things would have been good enough. And I started off my life working in retail. And then went on to get an office job and start working in marketing. So that was sort of the journey that I took. As you can see now, this year I was awarded an OBE in the New Year's Honours List, which was pretty amazing. And it's been a really unusual journey, I guess, my career, from, as I said, retail to an office role to completing a degree part-time in the evenings, which started off as being design and communication and ended up being a business degree. I changed after doing a few modules, realized that I was doing the wrong degree, to having quite senior marketing roles, and then taking the leap to start my own business about 16 years ago now. And I'm just going to talk to you a bit about some of the challenges I experienced on that journey and also some of the opportunities. But my work now is all about developing leaders, and that's leadership development in organizations, specifically for those who are minority in the workplace, and that's typically women and those from minority backgrounds like myself, helping them to break the glass ceiling, and also helping majority group leaders to really think about how they can create inclusive environments. And I also do one-to-one work and team building work as well. And it's not just me, I've got a team of about 20 facilitators. So that's been my journey. As I went through my journey, in the last role I had before going freelance and then starting my business, it was a colleague who's now a really good friend who tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Where next? Where you're going in your career?" And I remember at the time thinking, well, I've got a really good role here. Why would I want any more? It was about 15 minutes from my home. It was a senior role. Things sounded good. And she said, well, you could get a bigger team or a bigger budget elsewhere. You could train people in marketing because that's your expertise. And neither of those appealed to me. I wanted to stay close to home. I had a little daughter at the time. And I also didn't see myself as a public speaker. I didn't see myself as confident enough to speak to groups of people, something that I do every single week now. And then she said to me, what about coaching? Faculty come into your office, they go away with actions and motivated. And to this day, I don't know if she was just flattering me. I had an L-shaped office and people did used to come in and hide away. And I think that's more what they were doing than getting motivated by me. But I was always committed to my learning and development. And I thought, well, if my organization are willing to support me to go on a coaching program, then why not? It's something I can put on my CV and maybe I'll develop some new skills. And for anyone who has ever been on a coaching program, you'll know it's a transformational experience. It just made me look at the world differently. I loved marketing previously, but when I found coaching, I loved that even more. The power to have conversations that can transform the way people think and behave and unlock their potential was just huge for me. And I just knew that was the thing that I wanted to do. So for me, there was quite a lot that came in here. The fact that someone gave me feedback and recognized something in me that I didn't see in myself was pretty amazing. I don't think I would have ever decided, oh, I think I want to be a coach. I needed someone to see those skills and qualities in me. That was an amazing thing. The fact that coaching just made me see the world very differently from a psychological point of view, and really unlock people's potential and challenge myself and what I'd seen as the world was really powerful for me as well. And also, through this period, as I said, I did a degree part-time in the evenings. And that was really powerful for me as well. It gave me so much more confidence in knowing what I knew and being able to talk about that and share it, that I was just generally a more confident person and better at asking for what I wanted as well. It really did help me to know what I knew and be able to ask for what I deserve and negotiate better. So it just really helped. So that, in terms of my beginnings of my journey, that's how they came about. But I wanted to share some of the challenges as well, because it can sound like a bit of a fairy story. Oh, she started off in this council estate, now she's got an OBE, and it probably was all plain sailing for her. It absolutely wasn't. And one of the challenges, I think, for me was about being first. I'll go back to my mum, who I said was a teenage mum. She brought me up and my brother, and it was not easy for her. When I was a teenager, she decided to go on an access course, and then she became a teacher. And I remember at the time my brother being really proud of her, as I was as well, but saying to her, if you get a degree and Jenny gets a degree and I get a degree, we'll be the 3 degrees. And some of you will remember a group at the who were really popular at the time called the 3 degrees. And now we are all the 3 degrees. We all completed a BA, and I've gone on to complete an MA, and maybe my daughter will complete a doctorate, or maybe I will in the future, who knows. But my mum was the first, and it paved the way for us, because once someone's done it, you just think it's doable. If no one in my family had a degree, I think it would have been much harder for me to believe that I could do it. But I've also been the first in other ways as well. So I remember sort of quitting that day job to become freelance and then start my business in coaching and then leadership development. And people saying to me, isn't coaching just a fad? You know, how can you give up a steady job and a pension to go and do this thing that, yes, you love, but might not give you an income? And it's really hard to be that first person. And I also remember feeling quite isolated and feeling like the first in many different situations in work, being maybe the first woman of color or maybe just second in a senior role, for example. And it can feel a bit lonely. It can feel a bit scary. It can feel really challenging. How I tried to flip it was to say I'm a pioneer. I absolutely am paving the way for other people. Someone always has to go first and create that path. And definitely having a child helped me. Having my daughter made me think, if I'm not brave, how will she be brave? So even if I'm really scared, Damien said, it's a bit, he wanted to be brave and talk about the same-sex couple on Strictly, for example. If he's not brave, how will anyone else have those brave conversations? And for me, it was, if I'm not brave, then I can never ask my child to be brave. But being the first is hard. And some of you may be the first in many different ways. First in role, first in your level of education. Maybe you're the first to step into certain rooms from your background. And it's not an easy thing. I felt like I've just had to kind of close my eyes and hold my breath and dive in and hope for the best. And sometimes the best has happened, and sometimes it hasn't. Sometimes it hasn't felt like the best situation. And also sometimes I felt I've had to keep showing up in rooms that don't welcome me until they do. And that requires a level of resilience to keep saying, okay, I'm going back again. I'm diving in again, even though it wasn't comfortable the first time. And I'm going to keep doing that until it does become comfortable, because I feel that this is the room that I should be in. So it's not easy, being a Black woman, being a Black person and being the first, stepping into rooms where you're the only one, or taking a path that maybe even closest family don't get, why you're putting yourself through it. Even this morning, I spoke to a new coaching client, and she described the situation of friends saying, gosh, just get out of your organization. The dynamic's not quite right for you. And that level of perseverance that you need when you are the first, you need to have that sight, that foresight to think, what difference am I creating? What legacy am I creating by going through this? And it can feel like you are going through something, like you are running the gauntlet, that it's tough every day to get up and do the same thing again. And it's not easy to feel different, because you can feel highly visible and invisible at the same time. You can feel that every comment you make is being scrutinized, that if you say the wrong thing, what you're doing is creating a situation where no one who looks like you will ever get an opportunity again. And that's not something that happens when you're in the majority group. Your mistakes are your own when you're in the majority group. When you're in the minority group, your mistakes are your whole, can belong to your whole race, your whole ethnicity. And that is quite a burden. That's quite something to carry around. And so I found it at times really hard when I've walked into rooms and thought, I'm the only one here. I say the wrong thing. No one like me will ever be allowed in this room again. I'm kind of setting that bar. I got into this room, but if I make a mistake, then gosh, no one else will be. And that can feel quite crippling. It can feel really challenging, because it's like, maybe if I shut up and don't say anything, then I'll go under the radar. But then, you know, if you don't say anything, that you're not really showing your potential and giving what you need to the room. And it might be something that some of you have experienced, and this resonates with you. You know, what I've been able to do over time is just celebrate myself, just really own my difference, and really sort of say, yeah, I think about things differently. And that's because I had a working class upbringing. I'm a Black woman, and my lived experience is different. And I've done more and more to celebrate that, to celebrate my individuality, to celebrate, to wear sometimes, you know, my African print. I haven't done that today, but to wear my African print and really celebrate the color and flamboyance and my heritage. And actually, the more I do that, the more I felt, wow, actually my ancestors are with me. I'm in my full power, and I'm celebrating myself, and I can help other people to do the same. I'm not saying this is easy, and I'm not going to say to you that I feel like that every single day, and I'm not going to say to you that I didn't have to go through a journey to get to this place where I'm just confidently in a room and really proud of myself. I'm a member of something called the Company of Entrepreneurs, and although we're one of the most diverse companies in London, it still is mostly older white men who are in this group. And I remember my first steps into the group and just kind of trying to be myself in this space and not think, gosh, I don't fit in and I'm not the right person for this group. But that perseverance can really get you there. And it's not that the group necessarily did things to make me feel uncomfortable as such, but you know, there'll be in jokes, there'll be things people are talking about that just are not things that are in my frame of reference or my experience, that can make you feel that you don't quite belong. And then, you know, sometimes I've been limited by others' imagination. You know, someone like me doesn't do. Someone like me, you know, should stick to what people think the scope of my capability has been. And this does make me laugh when I think about this, because I think about opportunities I didn't get when people were limited to think, well, this is your capability, this is what you can do. And those same people who then come find you on LinkedIn and congratulate you on your achievements and tell you they always knew your potential. And you think, well, I didn't see that. I didn't notice that, where in our conversations previously, I didn't see the hand up or the sponsorship or the opportunity from you. And I find that really interesting. And I think people can be biased and can be limited, and they cannot see your potential. Don't let that limit you. I think it's so important just to ignore those doubters. They can't see it, they're blinded. That doesn't mean your potential doesn't exist. It's there, and it's up to you to just believe in yourself. I know that's easier, you know, that's easily said, but unfortunately, you just have to wait till you get to the point where they come back to you and say, exactly as in my experience, oh, we always saw it. You know, we always knew you were destined for these great things. And then you can just smile knowingly and enjoy that moment. But there will always, you know, there'll be promotions you don't get. There'll be rooms you're not allowed into. There'll be people who tell you you don't have the skills to do those things. I have had all of these. I've had all of it. I've had people question even my credibility and qualifications, because I didn't look like other coaches, because quite often coaches are white middle-class women, and me walk into the room, oh, what sort of coaching do you do? It must be with kids, because you couldn't be coaching executives. All of that bias and their limitations, and had to just step out of that and say, no, I know what my potential is. I know what my capacity is, and keep going and just keep going. So I guess I'm talking about a story of perseverance. Now I hear myself saying it, and choosing to challenge the status quo and what people think I'm capable of. And at times I haven't felt confident, and that confidence isn't just because I'm not a confident person, you know, but also because of the messages around me. You know, if you're in a conversation and people disregard or dismiss what you've said, or people talk over you, you know, if you're in conversation and people say things to you, oh gosh, you know, I spoke to you on the phone, but I didn't expect you to look as you do. Or you speak very well. That's a surprise, you know, seeing who you are. Or, you know, me having braids in my hair and people being curious, and pointing out the difference in, you know, my difference because of my braids. These sorts of things create a feeling of not being confident. So it's not just an internal, oh, maybe I don't feel confident. It's the fact that culture and situations can make you not feel confident. And that's hard because it's almost like a situation where you're every day happily walking along, but you're a person who's got a scar, and then you feel fine, and then someone points out that scar. And then you again feel unconfident again. And then you build it all up again, and then someone points that scar out again. It's that sense of people pointing out that you don't quite belong. And that can really fester that imposter syndrome and that lack of confidence. So that's been a tough one. And what I've done is I've challenged myself a lot. I've challenged myself to step out of my comfort zone, as I've told you, to step into spaces, you know, but sometimes people have asked me to do something and I think, I don't know if I can do it, but I'm going to say yes. And I'm either going to win or I'm going to learn, but I'm going to put myself out there. And of course, if you've been burnt before, that's hard to do. But for me, it's been essential to my growth to keep stepping out of my comfort zone, to keep putting myself in places that are different, to keep talking in spaces, to keep showing up in a way that's different, and just be really proud of it. And that has built my confidence. Confidence comes after action, not before action. So I encourage you not to wait to feel confident, to be in spaces, to do things, but to do it and develop your confidence as you go along. And that really has been my story. And absolutely, things haven't always gone perfectly, but I've learned for the next time. And without that, those experiences, I wouldn't have learned. I would have been safe and cozy in my bubble, but I wouldn't have had that growth. And the growth has been key for me. And something else I didn't have was a network. I really didn't have the network that some people have when they start businesses, when they start careers. You know, from my background, my network weren't necessarily the people who could open doors for me. And I've built that network. You know, develop your exquisite connections, develop a diverse network of amazing people, and think about what you could give as well as gain. Sometimes we feel that we haven't got anything to give. I would say then just ask people to share their story. People like to share their experience, and also people like to develop other people. So sometimes what you're giving them is an opportunity to help you develop. But generally just always think, what can I give? What have I got to offer? And always ask people what they're looking for, because even if you personally can't give it, maybe someone in your network can. So I always ask, you know, if I do network face to face, which I haven't done for a very long time, I always say, if there's one thing that you're looking for at the moment, what is it? And I might not be able to help, but I'll be thinking about who in my network might be able to, and who I can connect them with. And my network is really a huge key to my success. Helping people as I can, giving and not expecting something in return, but those things coming to me from the art of reciprocation, people wanting to give something back, or me doing a good job and people wanting to recommend me on. But your network, you know, is so important. Try and build a diverse network of amazing people, and build your community and the people that can help you. It's really easy to go stay in our comfort zone with people who have the same background as us, same education, look like us. It's so easy to do that. It's our comfort zone. But I really encourage you to reach out and get to know people who aren't like you, and definitely people who are more senior than you if you're thinking about your career, but people from different walks of life. It just builds such a richness of experience, a richness of perspective, but it will also help you. It will help you because you won't always hear the same answers from the same people. You will have people you can come to who can help you in many different ways, as well as the fact that you can get the joy from helping them as well. So it's really important to build and develop your network. And those people who say, oh, I don't like networking, I hate networking, the thought of it just makes me think of people throwing their business cards around and trying to get something from each other. You can build your network one person at a time, that's fine. Or you can build your network through social media in the beginning if you want to. There are many ways you can do it. So the social media is great for introverts, but also one-to-one coffees is a really nice way to build your network. Your network doesn't have to be thousands of people. It can be some really great people as you start, individuals as you start to build your community. So it's quality over quantity, most definitely. So, this idea of a sort of really stepping into who you are, and challenging in safe spaces and challenging outside of those spaces means that you have to speak your truth, even if your voice shakes. And that's not an easy thing to do, to speak your truth, to speak up and speak out. And there's lots to consider when you do it. What's the political environment? What's the room I'm in? Who holds power and all of that sort of thing. But there are people who've been brave enough to speak truth to power who I really admire. Who's this? Just type in the chat who you know, if you know who this is. Anyone? So it's can't see anything coming up, but sometimes there is a lag, to be honest. This is Tarana Burke, and she is the founder of the Me Too movement. So she was the person who spoke up. She started Me Too, spoke up about sexual abuse in the industry. So she created that. And that wasn't an easy thing to do. Thank goodness it carried on and we've been able to make changes in the media industry. But that was a really tough thing to do. Does anyone know who this is? Do type in the chat if you know who this is. Okay, we have a quiet group. Or is it just taking a while to type? So this is Samira Ahmed, and she's a British journalist who worked for the BBC. And she spoke up about the fact that her salary was a third of what Jeremy Vine earned. So it was about the pay gap that she experienced in comparison to a colleague. And she took the BBC to court and won. And she donated what she won to charity, which was amazing. And we have one more. Does anyone know who this is? So this is Gina Miller, who was taking the government to court over Brexit. Now, these women of colour spoke up, and I can't imagine how difficult it was to be working for the BBC and take them to court. I know that Gina Miller, I've met her, and she's had death threats to her and her family over taking the government to court over Brexit. And Tarana Burke, it was really challenging to speak up against the industry that she was working in. They spoke up even though their voice shook in order to make things better for others in the future. But it's a challenging thing to do. And what we get when we do things like that is sometimes we will receive aggression, and sometimes it's really challenging. And I really want to talk about the fact that there's an intersection of identities that doesn't always get considered. So if you're Black, you may receive racism. If you're Black and you're a woman, you might get sexism and racism. If you're a Black gay woman, then of course there's discrimination against your sexual orientation, as well as being Black, the racism, as well as gender discrimination potentially. And these things have a bit of a compound effect. So it's not just racism one thing and sexism another. 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2. It equals a lot more in these situations. And I think that's important to remember. Number one, when you're challenging, how much braver you might have to be because of how much you've experienced in the past, but also just others in organizations, majority group, understanding the barriers that you might have experienced. There's a lot that we often just think about gender, or we often just think about race. And it's really not just about, we've got to remember the intersection of our identities and the difference that makes as well. So it's a challenge. And what else is a challenge is the stereotypes. The angry Black woman, women generally being called too emotional, people assuming that people have partners and that they're just coming to work for fun. These are the sorts of comments that women might receive. But if we think about Black men, then often being called aggressive or arrogant in the workplace. There's assumptions for Black men that they're sometimes assumed to be not as intelligent, for example. We're dealing with all of this bias all of the time, and it can be really hard, and it can in the workplace and bring us down. I know Caroline Flanagan, she's amazing. So she's just written a book, Be the First, with regard to imposter syndrome. Great call out, because it's a fantastic book, and she's pretty amazing as well. So I've got a couple of questions for you, and I need some interaction. I'm not getting so much interaction, so I would like some interaction on this one. So what percentage of Black women have never had an informal interaction with a senior leader at their company? What percentage do you think have never had an informal interaction, so with a senior leader in their company? So give me some numbers in the chat, please. 76%. 75%. So we're going for 3/4. Oh, and now we're getting higher, 80%. Okay. So some quite high numbers are coming out here. I think the lowest is 45% that we're getting, and the highest is 95%. And what that speaks to is an understanding that it's not happening very often, and you're absolutely right. And why does this matter? Because informal conversations with senior leaders are what leads to sponsorship. And sponsorship is what really helps you navigate your career. So if you're not having those informal conversations, then your career is probably going to be stunted. You're going to reach that glass ceiling, or maybe even a concrete layer that's not going to get you any further. And what's going to happen is those who do have those informal conversations with senior leaders are going to go on ahead of you in your career. So the answer is 59%. And, you are all sort of around it, knowing that it is a lot. It's a lot. 60% of Black women haven't had an informal interaction with someone very senior. And that means that those 60% of women are very unlikely that they're going to be sponsored, and very unlikely that they're going to be able to reach their potential in their career. Another question from the World Economic Data Forum data. In 2020, this is a US-based one, but in 2020, while white women in the US earn 81 cents for every dollar a white man earns, the same figure for American Indian, Alaska Native, Black, African American, and Hispanic women is. So white women earn 81 cents. We know there's a gender pay gap, but if we think, let's think about this ethnicity pay gap. How many cents do you think a dollar every person from a different background might earn on average? So give us some figures again here in the chat. $0.65, 70 cents, 75 cents, 64 cents, 40 to 50 cents. Yeah. So again, an acknowledgement that if you're not a white woman, then you're likely, if you're a non-white person, is likely to earn less. And again, you're absolutely right. It's not a stark difference, but bearing in mind, 81 cents to the dollar already is bad. When it starts going to 75 cents because you're non-white, understand the challenges there. And that, this is recent data. We're still experiencing these challenges in 2021. So again, here, looking at the intersectionality piece, research from the UK has shown that LGBTQI plus peoples experience sexual harassment and assault at work. It actually varies on their ethnicity. So around a third of white women from the LGBTQI plus community reported unwanted touching. So what percentage of lesbian, bisexual and trans Black and minority ethnic women experience unwanted touching? So it's about a third if you are a white woman from the LGBTQI plus community. But what is it if you're a non-white person from that community? How much unwanted touching do you think those people experienced? So what do you think? Again, if you want to give me some stats here, 50, 75. So between 40, 50 and 75 being at the highest. So it goes up to 54%, so it goes from a third to over a half. So it's really important to understand this intersectional piece when we're talking about what it means to be a Black person, that the challenges when we consider other aspects really create challenges for us. And this is the last stat I'm just sharing with you for now. So people with disabilities, especially those from underrepresented groups, are overrepresented in the ranks of the unemployed. So data from the 2018 annual disability stats showed that 73.7% of US African Americans without disabilities had a job. But the percentage of US African Americans with disabilities who had a job was. And I'm just going to tell you what this is, 28.6%. Yeah, so if you had a disability and you were African American, it made it much harder for you to get a job than if you were a white person with a disability trying to get a job in the US. And I'm just sharing this because it's nuanced. And I really want us to consider this. As you know, if you are a Black person watching today, there is not one experience for Black people, but they're definitely the intersection of our identities is often not considered, and it makes a huge difference. So what can we do? Well, sometimes we have the opportunity to be able to challenge and speak up in particular situations, but it's hard. And what I say to you, first of all, is we cannot challenge every single microaggression, and every single comment would be exhausted and worn out. So I think if you are going to challenge, you have to decide, is this worth it? Am I safe to be able to challenge? Because if I'm not safe and I challenge, then I'm putting myself in a really difficult position. So you have to make sure that you feel safe. And you have to make sure that you have the energy and the resilience to challenge situations. And I think this is really, really important for you. And then if you are safe and you are able to do it, I think some of the things to consider are to state your views and ask genuine questions. So questions that are not trying to lead someone down a particular path, but are because you are curious and you want to understand someone, where someone is coming from. I think it's always important to share relevant information. So be specific, when this happened, this was said, and this is my experience of it. So be able to share those examples and be really specific and share what you mean by the words that you use, because sometimes people won't be familiar with the words you use because they're not familiar with talking about race or discrimination or that sort of thing. And try and focus on getting a positive outcome for both of you. But it's important that we do speak up, because otherwise what happens is things fester inside, and also nothing changes, and things need to change if you've experienced something that's not quite right. So some tools for you that could be helpful. Asking for clarification. Could you say more about what you mean by that? Or how have you come to think that? Sometimes people say very sweeping statements about whole groups of people. Or even, the example I gave, you speak very well, which seems to be a surprise. Well, what could you say more about what you mean by that? What is it about me that makes you say I speak well? And why you're not saying that to other colleagues? So that going in with curiosity can be a really helpful way to try and understand what people mean. And there's a picture of a teddy on this, because I like to use TED. T for tell me, E for explain, D for describe. Tell me a bit more what you mean. Can you describe to me where you're coming from? Can you explain a little bit more about your thinking about what you've said? So going in with a curious mindset can really open up a conversation and help then to call in behaviors, help someone to see that maybe something they said or did wasn't quite right. Another thing to do is just explain to someone, I know that you didn't realize when you said that you wanted to touch my hair, that was a bit hurtful and offensive to me, because it makes me seem like some sort of animal, some sort of curiosity. Instead, I don't want to touch your hair. I'd appreciate if you didn't ask, if you didn't want to touch my hair, because it's, for me, that's about my boundaries. Yeah, so it's going in, first of all, we're saying, I know you had a positive intention, but actually what you said or what you did wasn't okay. And I hope you'll understand that. So that's another way to go about doing it. And the last one is, if you hear someone say something that maybe is outdated, you can say, I noticed that, that you said this. I used to say that, but then I learned that's not okay. What you can say instead is, because we've all made mistakes and we're all human, and actually it's a challenge to say the right thing and be educated enough. But if we're all open to learning, then things can be better. So it can be helpful for you to share an example of something that you used to say or do that now you've since realized isn't okay, and you've changed your ways. And that gives an element of self-disclosure. It makes sure that you're both on the same level, and it stops that kind of parent-child. It's kind of, we're adult to adult here. We're having this kind of conversation. So these are tools that I use when I want to call in behaviors. There are so many examples. For me, sometimes when there've been only two black women in the organization, and they've confused my name with the other person repeatedly, so those are times when I've had to speak up and just say, your intention might not be to offend me, but it is offensive. We're both black women, but we don't look alike, and we're not the same person. And just take a moment to look at who I am and know who I am, and name me as the person that I am, because it actually becomes offensive. And I actually want to just respond to the name of my own name. It means a lot to me. So just being able to call these things out, these things that we experience all the time, and explain. Don't wait till it becomes to that boiling point where it's just, you've called me by the wrong name for the 100th time, I'm going to lose it. And then people don't quite understand. Try and nip these things in the bud and explain why it matters. So, don't wait for permission to challenge, to speak up, to be you, to celebrate yourself in your fullest self. Definitely don't wait to be confident. Just confidence comes from taking action. Challenge yourself to grow and develop despite microaggressions that you might experience in the workplace and beyond. The fact is, these things are here. While we're changing the world, we've got to be in the world and be growing in it at the same time. And also, if you see something that doesn't exist that you believe should exist, speak up about it. and join forces to be able to make it happen. Some of you in this on here might be people who are not Black. And I encourage you to be real allies to those of your colleagues or your students who are. So do speak up for people in the moment. If someone's being spoken over, amplify what they've said, for example, or defend them when they're not in the room. So speak up for them if you see bias in place. Ask probing questions of your colleagues if they're making sweeping statements. Yourself, when you're giving someone feedback, stick to the facts. Don't talk about things that are assumptions, mannerisms, that, things that don't really matter. Stick to the facts of the situation. And if you see bias at play, explain it and talk about it and unpack it and think about what you can do in the future. And do advocate for policy change or process change within the university. So my last thought, the world suffers a lot, not because of the violence of bad people, but because of the silence of good people. We need to continue to challenge and speak our truth in order to make that change happen. And we will. And we absolutely will. It's Black History Month. It's amazing the progress that has been made over the last 18 months. It's a sad situation that the catalyst for it was the killing of George Floyd. But we are making amazing progress, and it's important that we continue to do so. And it takes every single person, whether you're from the Black community or not, to make change happen. And when we do, it's better for every single person. Thank you so much for inviting me here today. It's been an absolute honor to start your Black History Week and Black History Month and start the week. And I'm very happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jenny. That was a really, really motivating and insightful talk, but also given us lots of really practical suggestions on what to do literally now, next steps for everyone. And so I think it's been really a helpful talk, as well as also making me think a lot about bigger picture issues and sort of inspirational too. So thank you so much. I don't know if people have got any questions. There's certainly nothing come into the chat so far, so please do now, reflect on Jenny's points and let me know if you've got any questions for Jenny. I've just got a couple of comments while people are reflecting. I think, some of the things that really resonated with me were, I think I put earlier on about confidence comes from action. And I think obviously that will resonate with people of all genders and all ethnicities, but I do think it's also really relevant in the education context as well, where we're in the business of helping students to build their confidence. And I think it's a really poignant message that you don't have to be confident to take action, and that will lead to further confidence. So I'd not really thought about it that way round. We always think about the linear confidence comes before action.
Absolutely, it's dipping that toe in the water and recognizing that it's okay. I can take small steps in the right direction. The waiting just leaves us paralyzed and overthinking as well, and absolutely not growing. But yes, it does take bravery, and sometimes you need someone to give you a little push in the right direction. So surrounding yourself with people who will really lift you higher is very, very important.
There's a couple of comments in the chat. People are sort of digesting and thinking about how what you've spoken about is mirrored in their own experiences. And Brendan, you've asked a question about are there legal interventions we can make with things that happen in the workplace and how to go about them? I imagine that's a very large answer across the UK, but
yeah, I think, I would start, Brendan, by looking at your policies and processes that you have. I think that's the starting point. Some organizations have a whistleblowing line as well. So maybe if you've tried things internally and it's not, or you don't feel safe to make a comment internally, then there might be an anonymous line you can call, and those are really good things. But I would always start with line manager, human resources, and then of course, if you're experiencing racism, then you go beyond that and get some legal advice. But it does depend on the situation. I hope that answers a little bit. There are, things like ACAS, and you might be a member of a union anyway, who also can give you advice.
Thank you. I think another thing that came to mind, it was sort of later on in your talk, you spoke about asking people and challenging them, how have you come to think that? Yeah. And actually that's something that people can use in a kind of a one-to-one space, but also as educators, it's something that we can use in the classroom as well, where we can, interrogate our own understandings of, power relations and debate that, as part of the delivery of the content. So I think it's a really poignant question. How have we come to think that, or how have you come to think that? But not as in putting people on the spot, but let us all think, how have we come to that position on this issue?
Yeah, especially as you're, I imagine, like so many higher education institutions at the moment, thinking about how you diversify the curriculum and have different voices within that, and who we've decided are the big voices in this field. Why has that been? I attended a retreat about a month ago now, and they kept on sharing poetry, which was beautiful poetry. But I said, there's so many voices who talk about nature, because it was about nature, and why are we only getting this, this voice? And it was, for them, it was a question for them to take away and think about. Why is that? Why am I not searching further? How have I decided that this is the voice that I'm going to share with everyone? And I think for all of us, we have to be open to being challenged and open to hearing that, because we can be defensive. Why have you come to think that? Well, I just do think it, and I am right. That's probably a natural reaction. But it's the sort of, okay, why? Yeah, let me think about that. Let me take that away. Let me take some time to unpack it. And it takes us all to listen, really listen, and then really reflect to move beyond where we are. So yeah, absolutely.
I think it's really important that we all demonstrate that we're also sort of vulnerable to just absorbing things without questioning them, and stopping to examine them, jointly with others and unpick things a little. So I think that's a really insightful question we can ask ourselves.
Yeah, and I think having a diverse network, because someone I think was saying it's hard to change your mindset. And I think the more you have people around you who challenge you, the better. My husband just thinks quite left field from me. I think he just generally thinks left field, but maybe that's how I feel about him. And he's always, I say something as fact, and he's like, why? I don't see it like that. And it just makes me stop and think every time. Sometimes I still believe what I believe, but it's like having people around you who don't all agree with you and just think in the same way is really key.
Absolutely. And I think, we're in a really rich position at our university and within the business school too, to really sort of access all those different voices as well. So inspiring to sort of take that forward. And I think you mentioned a question that we can ask colleagues. What one thing are you looking for, with a view to how can I help, how can I support, how can I put things your way? So I'm just going to sort of finish by asking you, what one thing are you looking for, Jenny?
Oh, goodness. In the world, just generally, or, well,
from us to take forward and make changes like this?
Yeah, I think for you to have conversations, I think if you're in the majority group, I encourage you then to look out for and be an ally to your Black colleagues, rather than them having to do all the work themselves. And I think if you are a Black colleague, what I suggest you do, I think, again, try and reach out to people who aren't like you, who are willing to support you. So you don't do it all on your own. That would be my suggestion. Reach out to each other, make connection, and support each other and learn from each other. And we create that, everyone will thrive.
Super. Thank you ever so much. I'm going to close on that really positive note, and thank you ever so much for your time, for joining us today, and for launching Black History Month in the university and in the business school. So thank you ever so much, Jenny. Thank you.
Enjoy, everyone, and do keep in touch. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.